Hello students, today we will start a new chapter, Force and Friction. First of all, try to understand the definition of force. Pull and push, as we know, is known as force. Force is push or pull or sometimes both. A force cannot be seen, but we can feel and observe the effect of the force. Because it is push and pull, so it creates some effect also that we can see. This is the example where we can say at sometimes it's push purely or pull, or sometimes it's combination of both. So ultimately, what is force? Force is push or pull or both. Now there are two different, if you speak about two category, broadly speaking, it has got two categories: contact forces and non-contact forces. Now further, if you divide contact forces, it can be divided into two subcategories: muscular force and frictional force. And non-contact forces can be divided into three subcategories, namely magnetic force, electrostatic force and gravitational force. So in this chapter related to force, we have to read about contact forces in detail and non-contact forces in detail. Today we will try to finish off this topic, that is contact force, muscular force and frictional force. Now in this slide you will come to know about the definition of different types of forces. We will study about the contact force, force experienced by the bodies when they are in physical contact with each other. So here in case of contact forces, two bodies, body 1 and 2, in physics we term different substances as body. So this is body 1, box, and body 2 is the body of the man basically. So here in case of contact forces, the force, what is contact force? It is the force experienced by the bodies when they are in physical contact. You can see in this picture two bodies are in physical contact. And second is frictional force. In case of frictional force, you can clearly see that here the first body is surface and second is this box, and they are also in contact. So we can say in case of contact forces, the contact forces are experienced by the bodies when they are in physical contact with each other. Now we have to study about muscular force in detail and frictional force in detail in today's module. So now first is muscular force. This force is due to the action of the muscles. Basically muscular force is a contact force and it is because of the action of the muscles. Frictional force is the force acting opposite to the direction of the motion. You can say this is a type of force which acts opposite in the direction of the motion. For example, this box is moving here in this direction. Somebody is pushing this box and this box is moving in this direction. But the surface is having some irregularities, or it is rough surface, and this rough surface is trying to stop the motion of the box, and that hindrance or that rough surface is providing the friction. So that is called the frictional force. Now the contact forces we have studied is muscular force and frictional force. What are the contact forces? Contact forces are those forces in which two bodies experience the physical contact. So example will be muscular force and the frictional force. And in you can see easily in non-contact forces, the two bodies are not in contact basically. If it is the force of attraction between the magnet and the nails, initially they were not, the two bodies, the nails and the magnet, they were not in physical contact. And here in case of electrostatic force also, these bits of paper and the initially they were not in contact. And same way in case of gravitational force. So that these all are non-contact forces and we will study them in detail in next module. But here in this module, our main focus will be on the contact forces. So before moving ahead and studying about the contact forces in detail, this topic is very important given in NCERT, that is the effect of the forces. We said that force is pull and push, and it creates some effect also. So what are the effects created by the force? First is it changes the shape temporarily. For example, if you want to apply force on a piece of paper and you crumble that piece of paper or crush, so temporarily its shape can be changed. Or like the way your mother kneads and kneads the flour or make the dough, so that time also, or when you play with the clay, that time also, and you exert the pressure and you make out different shapes and you turn it into different different items, so that time also you change the shape temporarily. Sometimes there is change in the shape permanently. Sometimes change in the direction of the moving object while playing football or cricket, you can imagine easily. Change the speed of the moving object also, and stopping a moving object or make a stationary object move. So if something is stationary, you can hit, for example, this ball is lying on the ground, you hit it and it starts moving. Or if it is already moving and you try to stop it from another direction, so it stops. So it stops a moving object or makes a stationary object move. So these all are the effects of forces. Effects of forces mean what the force can do exactly. So force can do n number of things. It can change the shape of the object temporarily or permanently. It can change the direction of the moving object. It can change the speed of the moving object. Not only changing the speed and direction of the moving object, it stops the moving object or makes the stationary object move. Now next we were talking about the types of frictional forces basically. So now next is the type of frictional forces. We know what is frictional force. Frictional force is a type of contact force. So this force is generally in opposite direction to the motion. For example, this box is lying on the floor. So if the motion is in this direction, frictional force will be acting opposite to the direction of the motion. So this is all about frictional force. Now we will study about the types of frictional forces. There are four types of frictional forces basically: static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, and next one is the fluid friction that we will study in next slide. So static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. These are the types of the friction. Now coming to the first one, static friction means when there is no motion. For example, this box is lying on the floor, no motion is there. Okay, so even then this another body, that is the floor, is exerting the frictional force because of the presence of the irregularities, some roughness on the surface. So there is a kind of a frictional force still, even if the box is not moving. That is called the static friction. And then sliding friction, second is if this box starts moving from this direction, it starts moving to this direction. So obviously if motion is in this direction, friction will be in opposite direction and it will try to stop it. It will try to pose some hindrance in the motion. So that will be sliding friction when the box or this body is moving, and if the two surfaces are in sliding, if the two surfaces are sliding over each other, so that time the friction which is generated, that is called the sliding friction. Same way, if two surfaces A and surface B, if they are rolling over each other, even then some friction will be there experienced by the body. So that type of friction will be rolling friction. So you can easily come out with a conclusion that static friction will be highest. Static friction will be highest. Then it will be highest, static friction will be highest, then the sliding friction and rolling friction will be least, because here the bodies are rolling, the two surfaces are rolling over each other, so the friction will be least and the movement will be easy. friction will be least and movement will be easy. So this is the three types of friction. So now we can see here in this slide definitions are given. There are three main types of friction, that is static friction, sliding and rolling friction. Static friction is the friction exerted on a object at rest. If the object is not moving, for example the table is static, even then the surface of the ground is having some irregularities, and the table is also having some irregularities. The leg of the table which are in contact with the ground, they are also having some irregularity, and there will be interlocking of these two irregularities, and because it is not moving, so there will be strong interlocking of the irregularities. That's why we say that uh, static friction is the highest one out of these three. Then sliding friction is the friction exerted when the object slides over the surface. And rolling friction is the friction exerted when an object rolls over the surface. So static friction is slightly less than the sliding friction is less than the static friction. So as I told you, static is the highest, then comes sliding, and the least friction is found in rolling friction, because the two bodies which are in contact, they roll over each other, and rolling is much easier when the two bodies they roll over each other. That time there is less chances of interlocking of the irregularities between the surfaces. Now next one is the fluid friction. This is a type of friction which is exerted by basically the fluid, gases and liquid. They are together called fluid. Fluid friction is also called drag. What is another name of the fluid friction? That is drag. So this is the friction. Fluid friction is the friction exerted by the liquids and gases basically. So you must be wondering how liquids and gases are exerting that kind of friction. So for example, if this aeroplane moves in the air, so that time air is also providing for this is the motion of the aeroplane, and air also provides some friction to it. So that is called the fluid friction, because air is fluid friction is exerted by air and liquid basically. So when the bird moves ahead, so the air also tries to stop the movement of the bird from opposite direction, so that is called fluid friction. Same way, if there is a boat or ship, when they move ahead in the water, that time liquid exerts some pressure, some friction from opposite direction. So that friction which comes or exerted from the opposite direction by the water or by the liquid is also fluid friction. So there are different types of fluid frictions. There are different types of friction. One is static friction we have studied, then we have got sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. Fluid friction is also called drag. Thank you very much. Revise well.